If you have ever checked the lock twice, pulled the door until it clicked, listened for the deadbolt to settle into place, you have already participated in the system people call safety. Because a home is not just walls and windows. It is a routine. A set of habits that repeats with such consistency, you stop noticing it. Garage opens at 7:12. Coffee starts at 7:15. Lights go off in the kitchen last. Kids' rooms first. Back door locked, without looking. Spare key hidden, just in case. A camera that faces the driveway instead of the side yard. A motion light that only matters when someone is already close enough to trigger it. Most days, nothing happens. The street stays quiet. The neighbors wave. Packages land on porches like offerings, and the house behaves like the object it appears to be. But systems do not fail loudly. They fail quietly, by being studied, by being mapped, by being entered at the exact moment you assumed no one could. In the United States, burglary is not rare in the abstract. It is counted. In 2024 alone, the Bureau of Justice Statistics estimated about 1.1 million burglaries, a rate of 8.2 burglaries per 1,000 households. That number is already unsettling, but it still sounds like something that happens to other people. A statistic you can hold at arm's length, until you remember what those numbers represent. A door tested, a window lifted, a latch that gave way, a hallway that suddenly had a presence in it, and sometimes it isn't an empty house. BJS research has found that in about 28% of household burglaries, someone is home, and in about 7%, a household member experiences violent victimization during the burglary. Which means, the idea we cling to, the idea that burglary is a quiet crime, a theft that happens when you are safely somewhere else, is not the full truth. The real danger is what feels procedural, not the dramatic moment of impact, but the sequence that leads to it. A routine that becomes predictable, a neighborhood that becomes readable, a house that becomes easy to understand from the outside. Because home invasion, at its core, is not always about force. Sometimes it is about access. Sometimes it is about timing. Sometimes it is about the smallest permission you did not realize you were giving. A door left unlocked once becomes a possibility. A spare key becomes an invitation. A delivery uniform becomes a mask. A friendly knock becomes a test. And once someone learns the system, once they understand your pattern, the house stops being a shelter and becomes a schedule they can exploit. Tonight, these are not stories about action heroes. They are not stories about people who fought back in time, or screamed loud enough, or made the perfect choice under pressure. They are stories about ordinary people, in ordinary places, who did what you would do. They trusted what looked normal. They followed the routine. They believed the house would protect them because it always had 5 homes. 5 moments where safety did not break like glass, but slipped, quietly, like a lock turning the wrong way. So check your doors. Listen to the quiet. Pay attention to the details you usually ignore, because the most frightening part of a home invasion is not always the intruder. It's the realization that the home you live inside every day can be learned, and once it is learned, it can be entered with confidence. And whatever is watching does not need to rush. It only needs to know when you stop looking. Story 1. Still running. I used to think running made me feel safe, not in the inspirational way people say it, like it clears your mind or resets your day. I mean safe, the way a locked door is safe, the way distance is safe, the way motion makes you harder to catch. After last year, I stopped trusting stillness, so I ran. That morning in Falmouth, the air had that late spring bite to it, the kind that smells like wet soil and salt carried in from Casco Bay. The neighborhood was quiet, in that respectable, suburban way, with lawns cut in straight lines and mailboxes like little sentries. A couple of sprinklers clicked on somewhere down the street, misting a hydrangea bush. I passed the same 2 houses I always did, the one with the wooden canoe hanging in the garage, and the one with the porch swing that never moved because no one ever used it. My playlist was low. I kept it that way now. No noise canceling, no drowning out the world. I liked hearing my own footfalls, and the small sounds a neighborhood made when it was pretending to be asleep. Shoes on pavement, my breath, a distant gull. I turned onto the longer stretch, The one where the road straightened out and the house is set back a little farther. And I saw him. At first, he was just a shape behind me, reflected in a dark car window. A moving figure, a rhythm that wasn't mine. I did the normal thing first. I checked without making it obvious. A quick glance at the side mirror of a parked SUV, then forward again, as if I had a reason to look. The man was there, maybe half a block behind, jogging at a steady pace, arms bent, posture clean like he'd done it before. It wasn't strange on its own. People jog. People match your route. Falmouth isn't a city, but it isn't empty either. Still, my stomach tightened. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself I was seeing patterns because my brain had learned to, because last year had trained me like a dog that flinches at raised voices. I kept running. The man kept running. I turned right at the next street, earlier than I usually did. A spur-of-the-moment change I didn't even think through. My route was always the same, and I hated that about myself. Hated how predictable I'd become. But I also hated how much comfort predictability gave me. He turned right too. Okay, I thought. Fine. It's a neighborhood. People live here. My pulse ticked up anyway. The sun was higher now, and the shadows of the trees striped the road like dark bars. Somewhere in a backyard, a dog barked once, then went quiet like it remembered it had no reason to be upset. I tried another turn, left this time, onto a shorter street that dead-ended at a small cul-de-sac. I'd never run down it before. It felt wrong, like stepping into someone else's life. The man turned left too. I looked ahead. No cars moving, no one in the yards, no garage doors open. The houses all looked shut, sleepy, sealed, curtains drawn. Porch lights still on from the night before. My throat went dry. I told myself, do not panic. Panic makes you clumsy. And I knew, with a sudden clarity that felt like cold water poured down my spine, that he was closing the distance, not by sprinting, not by charging, but by being patient, by letting me do the work, by letting me tire myself out. I sped up. Not a full sprint yet, just faster. A test. My calves tightened. My breath sharpened. Behind me, his footfalls sharpened too. The sound came closer with me, like my shadow had learned how to make noise. I ran harder. So did he. That was the moment it stopped being a coincidence. Every part of my body tried to remember what it did last year. My hands went cold. My vision narrowed. My mouth filled with that sour metallic taste of adrenaline. The world sharpened and flattened, like a photo with too much contrast. The house was only 2 streets away. Mine. Gray siding. Small front porch. A brass light fixture. I'd replaced myself. A wreath that had been on my door since winter, because I hadn't bothered taking it down. Home. My home. But home wasn't the word it used to be. I pushed into a full sprint. My keys were in the small pocket of my running shorts, the one that had a zipper. I'd started zipping it every time because last year taught me what it felt like to fumble. It taught me what it felt like to have your fingers disobey you. I tore the zipper open with shaking hands and wrapped my fist around the metal teeth. They bit into my palm. I didn't care. My lungs burned. My ponytail slapped my neck. When I hit my driveway, I could already hear him behind me, close enough that the sound of his breathing threaded into mine. He wasn't panting. He wasn't struggling. He sounded steady, like this was normal, like he did this often. I vaulted up my front steps and jammed the key into the lock. Missed once, missed twice, the wrong angle. My hands were trembling too hard. I heard his shoes hit the bottom step. Hey, he said. My body didn't recognize the word as language. It recognized it as sound. The key finally slid in. I turned it so hard it hurt my wrist. The door gave. I threw myself inside and slammed it behind me, twisting the deadbolt with both hands, then flipping the chain lock like it could change physics. The wood shuddered under the first impact. A heavy slam. Then, another. Open up, the man said, loud enough that it carried through the door and into my bones. Open the door. I backed away until my shoulders hit the wall beside the entryway table. The table wobbled. A bowl of keys rattled. My vision snagged on small details, stupid details, like the junk mail I hadn't thrown away, and the tote bag hanging from a hook. The door shook again. Open up, he repeated, like the words were a script. Like he didn't have to think. My phone was in my hand before I realized I'd grabbed it. My thumb hovered over the emergency call button. The screen was slick with sweat. I couldn't get my face recognition to work. He hit the door again. The house was silent around it. No music, no TV, no other human noise. Just the violent punctuation of his fist and the thin creak of the frame responding. I could hear him breathing now, close to the wood, as if he was pressing his face near the peephole. "Open the door," he said again, softer this time, almost coaxing. "I just need you to open the door." My legs wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. The hallway behind me led to the bedrooms and the bathroom and the small, empty office I pretended to use. The kitchen was open to the living room, windows on both sides, glass everywhere. When you live alone, you start to notice how much of your life is made of breakable surfaces. The pounding stopped. For half a second, I thought it was over, like maybe he'd gotten bored, like maybe this had been some weird misunderstanding. Then I heard footsteps on the porch boards, slow, deliberate, not retreating, circling. My throat tightened so hard it felt like swallowing glass. I moved toward the kitchen in a crouched, careful way that didn't make sense, as if being quiet could make me invisible. The back of the house had a sliding glass door that opened to a small patio. Beyond that was a strip of grass and a wooden fence that separated me from the neighbor's yard. The fence that had always felt like privacy, the fence that was really just decoration. I peered around the corner. He was there, standing outside the glass, framed by morning light, close enough that I could see his face properly. He was maybe in his early 30s, hair dark and damp with sweat, cheeks flushed from running. He wore a gray hoodie and black running shorts, and his shoes were bright, new-looking. His eyes were fixed on me with an intensity that made my stomach drop, like he'd been chasing something for a while and didn't want to lose it. He lifted his hand and knocked on the glass. Not a punch this time, a polite knock, knuckle to pane. Tap, tap, tap. "Open up," he said, and his voice was muffled through the glass, but the words were the same. "Hey, open the door." My body went somewhere else. I didn't choose it. The house, the kitchen, the morning, the glass, all of it blurred and slipped, and suddenly I was back in last year's version of myself, the one who believed her front door was enough. The one who believed suburbia was an agreement. It had been late then, not even midnight, just after 10. A Tuesday, because I remember thinking how rude it was, how wrong it felt for something terrible to happen on a Tuesday. Tuesdays were supposed to be boring. I just finished a shower. My hair was wrapped in a towel. I was in an oversized sweatshirt and underwear, barefoot, walking from the bathroom to my bedroom with a mug of tea I didn't even want. The house was quiet, and it was my quiet, the familiar hush of a place that held my habits. The refrigerator hum, the faint click of the heating system turning off, the soft, settling noise of the house as it cooled, then the sound, a faint, sharp clack from downstairs. Not loud enough to be dramatic, not loud enough to be a movie cue, just wrong. I froze at the top of the stairs, one hand on the railing. The tea sloshed slightly in the mug. For a few seconds, I stood there and listened, and the house offered me nothing but silence. My brain tried to do the kind thing. It tried to explain. "The house is settling," it said. "A cabinet shifting. A pipe. You're tired." I almost believed it. Then I heard it again. A soft drag, like something being pulled across the kitchen tile. My stomach dropped. I remember looking down the stairs and seeing darkness, and realizing how helpless stairs make you, how they funnel you, how they turn you into a silhouette at the top, exposed and stupid. I didn't call out. I didn't say hello. I didn't ask who was there. That's the part I'm proud of, if pride even applies. I backed up. I turned and went straight to my bedroom, not because it was safe, but because it was the only room with a lock, the only room with one solid door between me and whatever was downstairs. I shut it quietly, the way you close a door when someone is sleeping in the next room. Then I locked it. Then I leaned my whole weight against it. My phone was on the nightstand. I grabbed it with shaking hands, dialed 911, and for a split second, I hesitated because my mouth didn't want to make sound. It wanted to stay quiet. It wanted to pretend that silence could keep me alive. The call connected. The operator asked me my address. I gave it, whispering. Then she asked what was happening. "I think someone is in my house," I said, and I will never forget how surreal it felt to say those words. because I'd lived my whole life assuming that the phrase belonged to other people. People in news stories, people in different neighborhoods, people who made mistakes, who left doors unlocked, who did something to deserve it. I hadn't done anything. I'd locked up. I'd double-checked the deadbolt before bed, the way my mother taught me. The operator told me to stay on the line, to keep quiet, to go somewhere safe, in my own house. I dragged my dresser in front of the bedroom door. It scraped the floor. The sound was too loud. I hated myself for making it. Then, I moved my nightstand. Then the chair from the corner. I made a barricade out of IKEA furniture in panic. Below me, the house creaked. Then came the sound of a footstep, a real one, not settling, not pipes. A footstep on hardwood, moving slowly. Then another. He wasn't running. He wasn't crashing through rooms. He was walking, taking his time, like he belonged there. My skin crawled. I stood in the corner of my bedroom, between the bed and the wall, phone clutched to my ear, and I watched the doorknob with the kind of focus you get when your body decides it will remember every detail forever. The doorknob didn't move at first. Instead, I heard him downstairs, opening drawers. The kitchen drawer where I kept silverware, the one that always stuck a little. I could hear it catch and then give. He was going through my things. It was such a quiet violation that it felt worse than yelling would have. Then he moved into the living room. I heard the soft squeak of the couch cushion, like he sat down, as if he was waiting. I squeezed my eyes shut. My jaw ached from clenching. The operator was still speaking softly, telling me officers were on the way, telling me to keep breathing, telling me not to leave the room. And then, the footsteps came up the stairs. 1, 2, 3, slow. The stairs creaked under his weight, each step announcing him like a countdown. My mind started doing math. How many steps from the bottom to the landing? How many seconds between each creak? How long until he reached my door? When he got to the top, everything went quiet again. For a moment, I hoped he'd stop there, that he'd turn around, that he'd decide the upstairs wasn't worth it. Then the doorknob turned. My breath stopped. It turned again, harder this time, testing. Then the door shook, the barricade pushing back, furniture rattling. He didn't slam it. He didn't throw his body into it. That would have been easier to understand. Instead, he leaned close, and I heard his voice through the wood, soft, almost conversational. "Elizabeth," he said. I nearly dropped the phone. I didn't know how he knew my name. I still don't. My mail? The name on the package by the door? Something he'd seen through a window? But hearing my own name in a stranger's voice felt like my skin splitting open. "Elizabeth," he repeated, like he was trying to calm me down. "Open up," the operator whispered, asking what he said. I couldn't answer. I couldn't make my mouth work. The door shook again as he tried the handle. Then, to my horror, I heard the faint metallic scrape of something against the lock. He was working on it. My bedroom lock was cheap. It was meant to keep out toddlers, not men. I stared at the door and realized, with absolute certainty, that it would not hold. The only reason I'm alive is because of time, because my town is small enough that police response is quick, because somewhere nearby, a dispatcher heard my voice and took it seriously, because I heard sirens, distant at first, then closer. The man froze. The scraping stopped. I heard his breath on the other side of the door, a quiet exhale like disappointment. Then he moved, fast. Footsteps retreating down the stairs, suddenly not patient anymore. A door opening. The back door, I think. A rush of colder air, and then nothing but the sirens, growing louder, and my own body shaking so hard I thought my bones would rattle apart. When officers arrived, they found my kitchen drawers open, my couch cushion indented, my back door unlocked. Unlocked. I still have nightmares about that part, because I know I locked it. I know I did. After, the officers asked me 100 questions. Did I know anyone who would do this? Did I leave a window open? Did I have an alarm system? Did I have cameras? I answered them like a robot. I watched their faces as they walked through my rooms, looking at my life with professional detachment. They didn't find him. They told me they were sorry. They told me to change my locks. They told me to get a security system. They told me what everyone tells you after you survive something. You're safe now. But safety is not a switch. Safety is a story you tell yourself until you believe it again. And some stories don't come back. The glass knocked again. Tap, tap, tap. I was in my kitchen, a year older, still alive, still in the same house because moving felt like admitting defeat. The man outside raised his hand slightly, palms out like he was showing he wasn't holding a weapon. "Open the door," he said, and his mouth shaped the words like he meant them kindly, like he didn't understand what he was doing to me. "Come on." My phone was still in my hand. I had managed to unlock it. My thumb hovered over 911. I could taste bile in the back of my throat. He leaned closer to the glass, squinting, as if he was trying to see my face better. "Hey," he said, and his tone shifted, frustration creeping in. "I'm not trying to scare you." The back of my knees hit the kitchen island. I gripped the counter edge for balance, nails biting into granite. "Stay back," I said. My voice came out thin. It didn't sound like mine. He blinked. Then, like a person remembering something important, he patted the pocket of his hoodie. He reached in slowly, deliberately, the way people do when they know their movement matters. My muscles locked. He pulled out a wallet. A small black wallet. My wallet. For a second, my brain refused the information. It felt like a magic trick, like my mind was being asked to accept the impossible. I hadn't even realized it was missing. I'd left the house half awake, on autopilot. Keys, phone, shoes, go. He held it up against the glass like proof. "Hey," he said, his voice muffled but earnest now. "You dropped your wallet. I've been trying to catch you. I was calling out, but you had headphones, I think." I didn't have headphones, but I could see how he'd assume it. People assume runners are sealed off from the world. "I'm just trying to return it," he said. "That's all." He looked down, then around, as if suddenly aware of how he must appear, a man at a woman's back door. His face flushed deeper, embarrassment rising. "I'm sorry," he added quickly. "I didn't mean to. I mean, you were running. I didn't want to just throw it." My heart hammered against my ribs so hard it hurt. In my mind, I saw last year's door, the knob turning, the voice saying my name. "Open up, open up." I stared at the wallet in his hand and felt something inside me twist. Not relief exactly, but an exhausted sadness. A realization so heavy, it settled behind my eyes. Even when something is innocent, my body doesn't experience it that way anymore. Even when someone is helping, my brain searches for the hidden blade. The man glanced down at the patio table beside the sliding door, the small metal one I'd bought at a yard sale and never really used. He moved toward it slowly, as if he was afraid of spooking a wild animal. He set the wallet down carefully, like it was fragile. "There," he said, stepping back. "I'll just leave it, okay?" He raised his hands again, palms outward, then turned and walked away down the side yard, out of view. I didn't move. I stayed where I was, one hand on the counter, the other holding my phone like a lifeline. My legs trembled. My throat burned. Outside, the morning went on. A bird chirped. A car door closed somewhere. A lawnmower started in the distance. That low mechanical drone of normal life. It took me a full minute to step closer to the glass. The wallet sat on the patio table. Harmless. Ordinary. My driver's license inside. My debit card. A photo of me and my mother at Acadia, both of us squinting into the sun. A small black rectangle that had cost me everything in that moment. I slid the glass door open just enough to hook the wallet with my fingertips. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped it. I pulled it inside and slammed the door shut again, locking it with a click that sounded too small to matter. Then, I sank to the kitchen floor. The tile was cold against my legs. My breath came in shallow, uneven pulls, like I'd run another mile without meaning to. I wanted to laugh, the kind of laugh that comes out wrong, the kind that turns into a sob, because the truth was, he wasn't the threat. He was just a man returning something lost. But my body didn't care about truth. My body cared about survival, and survival had rewritten my rules. I sat there until the shaking eased, staring at the wallet in my lap like it was evidence from a crime scene. Eventually, I got up. I walked through my house and checked every lock, front door, back door, windows. I did it methodically, the way you'd check a list at work. I turned each deadbolt and tested each latch, even though I knew they were already locked. Then I stood in my living room and listened. The house hummed softly. The refrigerator, the faint tick of the clock. My phone buzzed with a notification, a calendar reminder for something banal. A meeting, a grocery pickup, life insisting on itself. I looked at the front windows, at the street beyond, where everything looked the same as it had an hour ago. Neat lawns, mailboxes, quiet porches. It occurred to me, with a slow, sick clarity, that there had been a version of me who would have opened the front door and taken the wallet, embarrassed but grateful, maybe even laughing at her own overreaction. That version of me died last year. She died the moment someone stood outside my bedroom door and said my name like it belonged to him. Now, I lived as the leftover, the survivor, the woman who knew what it felt like to be hunted inside her own home, and who could never fully unlearn it. I picked up my wallet again and ran my thumb over the edge, over the worn corner where it always caught. Outside, somewhere down the street, a runner passed by, footfall steady and carefree, someone who still believed in distance. I pressed my palm flat against my sternum, feeling my heartbeat finally slowing, and I realized something that made my stomach twist harder than fear ever had. Some invasions end, but some of them don't. Some of them simply move in quietly, settle into the corners of your day, and wait. And no matter how far you run, they keep your pace. Story 2. Delivery Window. There is a certain kind of quiet you only hear in the desert. It is not the peaceful kind people post about, not the wide-open silence that makes you feel small in a romantic way. It is the kind of quiet that feels like the world has stepped back a few feet and is watching you. Like the empty space around your house has weight. My parents' place sits on the edge of Las Vegas, where the neighborhoods thin out and the streetlights start to feel too far apart. In the day, everything looks sun-bleached and normal. Stucco homes, gravel yards with neat little succulents, a few palm trees that look like they're fighting the climate. The horizon is always too clear, the sky always too big. At night, though, the desert makes the dark feel more intentional. That weekend, it was supposed to be perfect. We'd been looking forward to it for weeks, the three of us texting in our group chat like it was a countdown to something sacred. Carmen Lopez had brought 2 duffel bags, one full of clothes and one full of snacks, because she said she didn't trust anyone else to pack correctly. Shay Smith had a portable speaker and a stack of horror movies she insisted were classic, even though I'd never heard of half of them. And me, Alyssa Short, I had the house, a whole house, just for us. My parents called it an adult weekend, with that specific tone adults use when they want you to know they're still cool. My mom had actually said the word casinos, like she was saying it for my benefit, like I was supposed to picture them dressed up and happy and out late. They were going with Carmen's parents and Shay's parents too. 3 couples, a weekend getaway, dinner reservations, shows, slot machines. They made it sound like a group field trip. They kept telling us all the same thing. Don't open the door for anyone. Don't leave the backyard gate unlatched. Keep your phones on. Order food, but don't tell anyone you're alone. My dad said that last one like it was a joke, like it was a funny little modern rule, but he said it twice. By the time their cars pulled away Friday afternoon, the 3 of us were already on the living room floor with blankets and nail polish, and the kind of laughter that makes your stomach hurt. It felt like freedom in the most teenage way possible. Not dramatic, not rebellious. Just finally, for once, not being watched. We made TikToks we never posted. We did face masks that made us look like aliens. Carmen tried to teach Shay and me a dance she swore was easy, and we all almost fell into the coffee table. Then it was night, and the air conditioning made the house feel too cold, and the windows turned into black mirrors, reflecting our faces back at us. Shay wanted to watch something scary, because of course she did. She said horror movies were comforting, which was the craziest thing I'd ever heard. Carmen argued for a rom-com. I said we could do both, because I didn't want to fight on our weekend. We ended up with Shay's choice first. The movie was the kind that used silence like a weapon. Long shots of empty hallways, a soundtrack that sounded like distant breathing, The kind of film where every creak in the house feels like it could be part of the story. Halfway through, Carmen got up and started rummaging in my kitchen cabinets like she owned the place. "We need pizza," she announced. "Obviously," I said. "My family has a tradition. It sounds silly when I say it out loud, but it's real. Every weekend, at least once, we get Papa John's. It started when I was little, and my dad was working late all the time. Friday nights were pizza nights, no matter what. It didn't matter if we were broke. It didn't matter if we were busy. Papa John's meant the week was done. It meant we were all in the same room. So when Carmen said pizza, my brain didn't even process the possibility of something else. Pizza was normal. Pizza was safe. Pizza was home." Shay made a face. "I thought Italians hated chain pizza." "I'm Italian," I said, pointing at myself like it was evidence. "And I love it. It's a family tradition." Carmen grinned. "See? Cultural significance. We checked the fridge. Nothing that wasn't a condiment or something my mom would use in a salad." Carmen waved her phone around like she was searching for signal, even though the Wi-Fi was fine. "My mom said they might order us food," she said. "Like, surprise us." My dad said the same, Shay added. That settled it in our minds. The idea became a fact. Parents out at casinos, feeling generous, sending pizza to their daughters like a sitcom. We went back to the living room and waited, half watching the movie, half watching our phones, the way you do when you're expecting something you really want. At some point, I must have gotten too comfortable. I remember the blankets around my legs, the glow of the TV, Shay's braids falling forward as she leaned toward the screen. Carmen's laugh was soft, as she whispered a comment about how the main character was making dumb choices. Then, the knock. It didn't sound like it belonged in the movie. It came from the front door, sharp and real, and it cut through the room in a way that made all three of us freeze. We looked at each other. "Pizza," Carmen mouthed, like she was afraid to say it too loudly. Shay lowered the volume. The TV became a muted flicker. Another knock came, a little impatient this time. We all moved at once, the three of us sliding off the couch like we'd rehearsed it. The living room opened into the entryway, and beyond that was the front door, painted a pale tan that blended into the stucco outside. There was a peephole. There were 2 locks. There was a small Ring camera my dad had installed after our neighbor's car got broken into. We didn't think about any of that. We thought about pizza. Carmen leaned in and peered through the peephole. "Yep," she whispered. "Delivery guy." Shay pushed closer. "Is he holding it?" "Yeah, box bag thing." My stomach actually fluttered with happiness. It's embarrassing how much joy a pizza can bring when you're 16 and the night feels wide open. I stepped up and slid the inside light on because I wanted whoever it was to know we were there, to know we were coming. Then I unlocked the top lock. Carmen's hand touched my arm. "Wait, should we ask who ordered it?" "It's fine," I said, because I genuinely believed that. "It's Papa John's. It's probably my parents." Shay was already smiling. "If your parents got garlic knots, I'll forgive them for leaving us." I opened the door. At first, it was exactly what we expected. A man in a delivery uniform stood on the porch. He had a cap pulled low and a thermal bag in his left hand. The porch light made his face look pale and washed out. He wasn't old, maybe late 20s or early 30s, but there was something about his stillness that made him seem older. He wasn't shifting his weight like people usually do. He wasn't smiling. His eyes flicked past me, past the doorway, into the house like he was counting shapes. "Evening," I said, bright and automatic. He didn't respond to that. Instead, he tilted his head slightly and asked, in a tone that was wrong in a way I can't fully explain, "Are you 3 girls alone in here?" It was the exact moment the air changed. The question wasn't normal. It wasn't part of any delivery script. It didn't match the pizza in his hand. Behind me, Shay went very still. Carmen's fingers tightened on my arm. I should have lied. I know that now. I know it in the way you know you should have grabbed the handrail before you fell. But in the moment, my brain was still running on the assumption that everything made sense. And Carmen, on instinct, because Carmen always answered things quickly, said, "Yeah, our parents are at the casino for the weekend." The delivery driver's expression changed immediately. It wasn't dramatic. He didn't grin or laugh. It was subtler than that, which made it worse. His eyes sharpened, like something had clicked into place. Then he moved, fast. Before I could even step back, he shoved the thermal bag into my chest hard enough to knock the air out of me. My feet slid on the tile. The edge of the door slammed against the wall. He came in with the momentum of someone who'd already decided. Carmen screamed. Shay's hands flew up. I tried to push him back out, but he was already inside the threshold, already in our space. His shoulder hit mine. His breath smelled like cigarettes and something sour. "Back," he said, and it wasn't loud, but it was sharp, commanding. "Back up." His right hand came out from behind his body holding a knife. Not a little pocket knife, not a tool. A kitchen knife with a long blade that caught the porch light and turned it into a thin, bright line. My entire body locked. It felt unreal. Like a prop. Like something from the movie still playing silently in my living room. But Shay made a sound. A low, choked noise that told me she understood exactly how real it was. "Please," Carmen said immediately, her voice shaking. "Please, take whatever you want. Just leave." He didn't look at Carmen. He looked at me. Maybe because I was closest. Maybe because it was my house. Maybe because I was standing there with a pizza bag pressed to my chest like I'd been handed a bomb. "Inside," he said. "All of you, move." Shay's eyes met mine. I saw the same thought in them. The same desperate attempt to find an exit, a weapon, an adult, a miracle. But the house was suddenly a trap. The door behind him, the windows that were too high, the silence outside. We moved because the knife made our bodies obey. He herded us through the entryway into the living room, pushing the door closed with his foot behind him. The click of it shutting sounded too final, like a lock clicking in a prison. The movie on the TV kept flashing, a character's face frozen mid-scream in a silent world. The delivery driver, because I still thought of him that way even as everything shattered, pointed the knife toward the hallway. "Bedroom," he said. Carmen shook her head, crying. "Please, please don't." "Bedroom," he repeated, louder. "Now." We went down the hallway like it was a tunnel narrowing around us. My heart was pounding so hard it made my vision pulse. I could hear Shay breathing in short, sharp bursts. Carmen was sobbing openly. Her hands held up, as if that could shield her. The man followed close, the knife angled forward, and I realized, with a cold, horrifying clarity, that he wasn't improvising. He wasn't uncertain. He knew where he wanted us. He pushed us into my parents' guest bedroom, the one with the beige comforter and the framed desert print on the wall. The room smelled faintly like laundry detergent and unused space. "On the floor," he said. We got down. The carpet pressed into my knees. The air felt too thick. He reached into his hoodie and pulled out zip ties. My stomach dropped again. This wasn't random. This wasn't a guy who snapped at the door. He had come prepared. He tied our wrists, tight enough to hurt, but not tight enough to cut off circulation, and he did it with a grim efficiency that made my skin crawl. Shay struggled, once, instinctively jerking away, and he raised the knife close to her face in a warning that made her freeze. "Stop," he hissed. He tied our ankles too, then back toward the door, still holding the knife, eyes darting from face to face, like he was watching for movement. "You scream," he said, voice low, "and I come back in." Then he stepped out and shut the door. We heard the lock click. For a second, none of us moved. Not because we didn't want to, because our brains couldn't accept the fact that we were locked inside a bedroom in my own house, tied up, while a stranger with a knife walked freely in the rest of our lives. Carmen was the first to break. She started shaking violently, tears sliding down her face into the carpet. Shay leaned toward her as far as she could, with her wrists bound. Carmen, look at me. We have to stay quiet." Her voice was steady in that way that didn't match what was happening. It made me want to cry harder. Shay was always the calm one, the one who could talk to teachers without panicking, the one who could stop a fight just by looking at someone. But this was bigger than us. I tried to move my wrists. The zip ties bit into my skin. The pain helped keep me grounded. "What do we do?" I whispered. Shay's eyes were wide, shining. "We wait. We listen. We don't make noise." Carmen shook her head, whispering frantically. "He asked if we were alone. He asked. That's not normal. That's not. I know," Shay said. The house beyond the door creaked. We heard footsteps, slow, wandering, like he was exploring. Then a drawer opening, a cabinet door, something clinking. He was going through our kitchen, our living room, our things. The worst part was the uncertainty, the not knowing where he was, what he was doing, whether he was bored, whether he was angry, whether he was planning something. Time stretched. My legs went numb. My hands ached. Carmen's breathing came in little squeaky bursts as she tried not to sob too loud. Then we heard him talking. At first, I thought he was on the phone, but the voice was too close, too loud. He was talking to himself, words drifting down the hallway, not coherent, fragments and muttering like a radio between stations. It made my scalp prickle. It made the situation feel less like a robbery and more like something unpredictable, something that could change shape without warning. "Stupid," he muttered at one point. "Stupid girls. Stupid." Carmen squeezed her eyes shut. Shay stared at the door like she could force it to open with her mind. I kept thinking about the Ring camera, about how my dad would see him. Then I remembered the angle, the porch, the front door. It wouldn't see him inside. It would see the moment we opened the door, then nothing, and we'd opened it. We'd invited the dark in like it was carrying dinner. I don't know how long we were in that room. Maybe 20 minutes, maybe an hour. It felt like a night compressed into a tight space. Then my phone buzzed. The sound was tiny, almost nothing, but it was loud in a room where we were all holding our breath. It was in my pocket. My heart lurched. I couldn't reach it with my hands tied. It buzzed again, and again. Carmen's eyes snapped to me, panicked. Shay leaned in, whispering, "Don't move. Don't make it worse." The buzzing stopped. A few minutes later, it started again. This time, longer, persistent. My mom's voice echoed in my head, "Keep your phone on." Dad's voice, "Don't open the door." I imagined my parents in a casino, lights flashing, noise everywhere. My mom checking her phone with a little smile, like she was being responsible, like she was going to ask how our weekend was going. I couldn't answer. The buzzing stopped. Then, later, it buzzed again, 3 times, each one like a pulse. The third call felt different. It lasted longer. It was insistent. And then it stopped abruptly, as if someone had made a decision. Outside the bedroom, footsteps moved fast. The man's voice rose, angry now, yelling at no one, words slamming into the walls. Then the house went quiet, suddenly, as if he'd realized something. I stared at the door. Shay's voice was barely audible. "My mom would call if I didn't answer," Carmen whispered. "My dad too." And then, like a confirmation of our fear, the sound of a phone rang somewhere in the house. Not mine, not in the bedroom. The intruder answered it. We couldn't hear the words clearly, but we heard the rhythm. Someone trying to sound normal, someone trying to imitate. "Hello?" he said, too cheerful, too quick. Then he paused. Yeah, we're fine." My blood went cold. He was pretending. He was pretending to be my dad, because the voice was lower now, forced, and he was speaking like an adult on the phone, not like a pizza driver. I heard my father in my mind, calm and careful, and I heard this stranger trying to wear that voice like a mask. Then there was silence. Then the man laughed, a short, sharp sound, and hung up. We sat there, tied up, listening to the house, and the terror shifted shape. It wasn't just the knife anymore. It was the understanding that he was willing to interact with the world outside, that he could mislead people, that he could buy time. Then, distant, faint, almost impossible to hear through walls and fear, came a sound that made my eyes fill with tears. Sirens. Not the movie, not the soundtrack. Real. Approaching. Shay closed her eyes and exhaled. One long breath, like she'd been holding it for hours. Carmen let out a sound that was half sob, half prayer. The sirens grew louder, then cut off abruptly, as if the police car had stopped just outside. The house went still. Footsteps moved again, quick and purposeful, toward the front door. We heard the chain slide, the lock, the door opening. Then a voice. A man's voice. Firm. Controlled. "Sir," he said, and it echoed faintly down the hallway. "We received a call from this residence. Can you step outside for me?" The intruder's voice changed again, deepening, smoothing, trying to become my father. "There's no problem," he said. "I'm the homeowner. Everything's fine." The officer didn't sound convinced. "Okay," the officer said slowly. "Can I see your ID, sir?" A pause. A long pause where the house seemed to hold its breath with us. The intruder said, and for the first time he sounded unsure. "It's inside." "Then let's get it," the officer said, still calm, still firm. Another pause. Then sharper. "I don't need to show you anything. I told you, I'm the homeowner." The officer's voice hardened slightly. "Sir, the caller is still on the line with dispatch. They are saying you are not the homeowner." My stomach flipped. Dispatch. My dad. The call. He'd called 911. And the officer knew. The intruder's voice turned brittle. "This is ridiculous," the officer said. "I'm going to ask you one more time. Show me your ID." We heard a shuffle, like someone moving on the porch. Then another voice. A second officer. Quieter. Saying something we couldn't make out. Then the first officer spoke again, louder. "Sir, step back. Keep your hands where I can see them." My heartbeat pounded in my ears. In the bedroom, Shay shifted, trying to rub her wrists against the carpet. Carmen stared at me like her eyes could ask a question she didn't have words for. Then we heard it. A sudden thud, like a body hitting the doorframe. A scuffle. A curse. The officer shouted something, and then the sound of the front door slammed. Footsteps pounded inside the house, not wandering now, but running. The intruder was moving deeper in, away from the porch, away from the police, toward us. Shay's eyes went wide, her face draining of color. Carmen began to whimper. I tried to scoot backward, dragging my bound legs uselessly, until my shoulder hit the bed frame. The wood felt solid and cruel behind me. The doorknob rattled, once, twice. Then the lock clicked, and the door opened a fraction before stopping, caught by something. Maybe the officer pushing from the other side, maybe the intruder trying to force it. A voice filled the hallway. "Close now." Commanding. "Police," the officer shouted. "Step away from the door. Step away now." The door jerked, then slammed shut again. Silence. Then the officer's footsteps moved fast down the hall. Closer, and a key turned in the lock. The door flew open. An officer stood there, gun raised, eyes scanning the room, his face taut with concentration and adrenaline. Behind him, another officer, slightly farther back, covering the hallway. For a second, they looked at us, like they couldn't process the sight. 3 girls on the floor, wrists bound, ankles bound, faces streaked with tears. Then, the first officer swore under his breath and rushed in. "It's okay," he said, voice softer now, urgent. "You're okay, we've got you." He knelt and began cutting the zip ties with something small and sharp. The plastic snapped. Blood rushed back into my hands in hot, painful tingles. Shay's breath came out in a sob she'd been holding in the whole time. Carmen started crying so hard she shook. "Where is he?" the officer asked, scanning the room again as he freed us. "Did he come in here? Did he leave?" I tried to speak, but my throat felt sealed. The officer's radio crackled. Voices layered over each other, urgent updates about the front of the house, about the backyard, about a suspect moving through side yards, about a vehicle, the unknown car. My dad had seen it. That was what made him call. That was what saved us. My legs finally freed. I pushed myself upright, dizzy, my knees weak. The officer helped me stand like I was much older than 16, like I might collapse into dust. "Your parents are on the way," he said. "Stay with us." But even as he said it, my eyes drifted past him to the hallway, to the shadows beyond, to the rest of my house. Suddenly unfamiliar. Every open doorway looked like a mouth. Every room looked like it could be hiding something. My brain kept replaying the moment at the door, the way we'd seen a uniform and a pizza bag and assumed it meant safety. The officer led us out into the living room. The TV was still on, the horror movie still playing silently, characters moving in, flickering dread, while real life stood in the same space, heavier and colder. The front door was open. Night air poured in, warm and dry. Outside, red and blue lights strobed across the stucco walls, turning my yard into a pulsing, surreal scene. Neighbors had stepped out onto their porches, drawn by the commotion, faces lit by the police lights, eyes wide with that distant curiosity people get when danger happens near them but not to them. I saw my dad's car skid into the driveway a few minutes later, my parents spilling out like they'd been launched, my mom's face white, her hands shaking. Carmen's parents and Shay's parents arrived too, all of them frantic, voices overlapping, adults suddenly small in the face of something they couldn't control. My dad grabbed me, crushing me to his chest so hard it hurt. "I called," he kept saying into my hair. "I saw the car. I saw the car. I called." My mom's hands framed my face, checking me like she could fix what she was seeing. "Baby," she whispered, voice breaking. Oh my God. And all I could think was that I had opened the door. I had opened it like it was a gift. Later, after statements and blankets and water bottles, we couldn't drink because our hands shook too much. An officer came over and spoke quietly to my parents. I caught pieces of it. The suspect had fled on foot. They were searching the neighborhood. They had units out. They had a description. They had the vehicle. I kept staring at the driveway, at the place where the unknown car had been parked earlier, the place my dad saw on the Ring camera, the window that saved us. I realized, sitting on the curb with my knees pulled up to my chest, that the most terrifying part wasn't the knife or even the bedroom lock. It was how quickly our brains had filled in a story to make everything feel normal. A knock, a uniform, a pizza bag. And we had written the rest ourselves. It made me wonder how many times a day we do that. Not just with deliveries, but with everything. How often we assume a thing is safe because it looks like other safe things we've seen before. How often we open doors. When I finally went inside again, escorted by an officer, the house smelled like cold air and disturbed space. The guest bedroom carpet still showed the faint impressions where we'd been pressed into it. The zip ties, cut and discarded, lay like little broken loops of plastic on the floor. On the kitchen counter, the pizza bag sat abandoned, the Papa John's logo facing outward like a cruel joke. The officer asked if we wanted it thrown away. I nodded too quickly, because I could already see how it would feel in the future, how the sight of that logo would make my stomach turn, how garlic sauce would smell like fear. I stood in my living room, staring at the front door, and my mind kept replaying the delivery driver's question, the one that didn't belong. "Are you three girls alone in here?" It wasn't just a question. It was a test, a probe, a crack in the surface of the world. And I realized something that made my chest tighten so hard I could barely breathe. The scariest thing about that night wasn't that something bad happened. It was how easily it could have happened without warning, without reason, without any dramatic signal that we were about to cross a line, because nothing about it looked like danger, not until it already was. And now, every time someone knocks on a door, every time I see a uniform, every time I smell pizza in a hallway, my mind does something it never did before. It asks what else might be hiding behind what I think I see. It listens to the quiet outside the house, the desert quiet, the watching quiet, and wonders how many people are out there depending on us to make the mistake first. How many of them are holding something in one hand and a story in the other, waiting for us to believe the wrong one. Story 3. Someone used the living room. The first time I noticed it, I blamed the divorce. That's what I blamed everything on back then. The way my keys never seemed to be in the same place twice. The way I'd stand in my kitchen staring at the open refrigerator like I'd forgotten what food was. The way I'd wake up at 3:11 a.m. with my heart racing, certain I'd heard someone say my name, only to find nothing but the quiet hum of the air conditioning and the far-off sweep of cars on the main road. When your life splits in half, your brain starts dropping small things, details, minutes, entire thoughts. It becomes easy to believe you're misremembering. So when I walked into my new apartment that first week and found one of the kitchen cabinets cracked open, I sighed, closed it, and moved on. I told myself I'd done it. I told myself I was tired. The apartment was ground floor, which was the only reason I could afford it. Phoenix rents were doing what Phoenix rents always did, which was climb faster than anyone's paycheck. My unit was on the end of the building, tucked behind a mesquite tree and a row of decorative rocks that looked clean and sharp under the desert sun. The leasing agent had smiled when she showed it to me. "You'll love it," she said. "Quiet, great natural light." She didn't mention how the patio gate latch stuck sometimes, or how the bedroom window's lock felt loose if you didn't press it down just right. She didn't mention how the laundry room across the breezeway slammed at all hours, or how the neighbor above me liked to walk around at night like he was training for a marathon. Still, the place felt like a reset button. My old house had been full of my wife, full of her mugs, and her throw pillows, and her favorite candle scents that made the whole place smell like vanilla and certainty. When she left, the house didn't feel empty. It felt haunted by normal life. I couldn't sit on the couch without imagining her legs tucked under her. I couldn't open a drawer without finding a rubber band she'd used to bundle mail. So I moved into a smaller place with beige carpet and white walls and a quiet kind of anonymity. I bought new towels. I set up my own coffee station. I put my toothbrush on the right side of the sink without thinking about it. I wanted to feel like I belonged to myself again. The first week, the only sounds were mine. The click of my shoes on tile, the beep of the microwave, the soft slap of my keys hitting the counter when I came home from work. At night, the building settled into a kind of desert hush, broken only by the occasional engine in the parking lot and the chirp of a lizard somewhere outside. Then the little things started. A cabinet door slightly open, a bathroom drawer pulled out just enough that I'd bump it with my hip, the shower curtain drawn closed when I was certain I'd left it open to dry. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't the kind of thing you call the police over. It was the kind of thing you shake your head at, the way you do when you can't find your sunglasses, even though you swear you put them on the table. I started making jokes to myself. "Come on, Daniel," I'd mutter, shutting the cabinet like it was punishing me. Get it together. I was alone. No one to correct me. No one to say, "No, you left it open. I saw you." Being alone does that to you. It turns small uncertainties into quiet accusations. I tried to be responsible about it, the way a divorced man tries to be responsible about everything because he's terrified of becoming a cautionary tale. I started being intentional, narrating my actions in my head like I was filming a tutorial. Lock the door, deadbolt, chain, hang the keys on the hook, close the cabinet, check it twice, turn off the lights. I even started taking photos sometimes, stupid little snapshots of the stove knobs turned to off, the front door locked, the cabinets shut, as if I was building a case against my own forgetfulness. At first, it helped. Then, it got worse. It was a Thursday when I came home, and my TV was on. Not just on, but playing. A sitcom I used to watch when I was too tired to think. The volume was low, like someone had turned it down on purpose. The characters were laughing, canned laughter spilling into my living room like it belonged there. I stood in the doorway with my work bag still over my shoulder and stared at the screen. I knew I'd turned it off. I was sure. I remembered pressing the power button, the little red LED light appearing. I'd even locked up in that new, careful way I'd been practicing, checking the deadbolt twice. But there it was, my living room lit by the blue glow of someone else's decision. I walked in slowly, like the air might change if I moved too fast. I paused near the couch, scanning the room for obvious signs, for anything that would make this make sense. Nothing looked disturbed. The throw blanket was folded the way I'd left it. The remote was on the coffee table, angled slightly toward the edge. My mail was stacked neatly. There were no footprints in the carpet, no broken window, no obvious threat. Just the show playing softly, like it had been keeping my apartment company all day. I picked up the remote and hit pause. The laugh track froze mid-laugh, the silence after it felt too big. I walked to the kitchen and checked the cabinets, all closed. I checked the bathroom. The shower curtain was drawn closed. I hadn't showered that morning. My phone buzzed in my pocket with a work email, and the sound made me jump so hard my heart slammed against my ribs. I laughed out loud, a short, embarrassed sound. "Jesus," I muttered. "You're losing it." I told myself it was a glitch, a power flicker, a neighbor's remote interference, anything. That night, I went to bed early because I was exhausted from fighting my own mind. At 2:17 a.m., I woke up to the sound of my TV turning on. Not loudly, just the soft electronic click, followed by the faint glow under my bedroom door. My body went cold so fast it felt like someone had poured ice water into my veins. I lay there, staring at the door, listening. There was no laugh track this time, no sitcom voices, just the quiet hiss of the TV idling on a menu screen. The bedroom smelled like laundry detergent and dry heat. My mouth tasted like sleep. My hands were damp. I reached for my phone on the nightstand with shaking fingers. I didn't move yet. I didn't sit up, because last year had taught me something too, in a different way than Elizabeth's story would have. Divorce teaches you how quickly something can change while you're asleep. How you can go to bed believing one thing and wake up in a different life. I unlocked my phone and turned on the flashlight, keeping it dim. My thumb hovered over 911. I listened again. No footsteps. No voices. No rustling. Just the TV's quiet glow under the door, like a line of light marking the boundary between my bedroom and whatever waited outside. I got up slowly. The carpet felt too soft under my feet. My heart thudded in my ears, loud enough that I worried it would give me away, which was a ridiculous thought, because if there was someone in my apartment, they already knew I was here. I reached the door and put my hand on the knob. It was warm. That was the detail that made my stomach drop. Warm, like someone had touched it recently. Like heat had transferred from skin to metal. I tightened my grip until my knuckles ached. Then, I opened the door. The living room was empty. The TV was on, displaying the streaming service home screen. The remote sat on the coffee table, where it always did. Nothing moved. No shadow slipped behind the couch. No figure stood in the kitchen. Just my living room, quiet and still, washed in the pale blue light of a menu asking me what I wanted to watch next. I stood there with my flashlight beam cutting across the carpet, across the couch, across the empty corner where I'd placed a cheap floor lamp. My body didn't believe the emptiness. It kept waiting for something to reveal itself. I checked the front door. Locked. Deadbolt. Chain. I checked the patio door. Locked. I checked the windows. Locked. Everything was sealed. I stood in the center of the room, feeling ridiculous and afraid at the same time, and I realized how vulnerable it felt to live alone, how there was no one to share reality with, no one to say, "I heard that too," or "You're imagining it." I turned the TV off and went back to bed, telling myself it had been some sort of power glitch. I told myself it had to be. But when I laid down, I stared at the ceiling for an hour, listening to the building breathe, listening for the smallest sound that didn't belong. The next day at work, I couldn't focus. I kept thinking about the warm doorknob, about the TV turning on without me, about the shower curtain being drawn closed. Those aren't the kind of things that happen accidentally. Not all of them, not repeatedly. At lunch, I sat in my car in the parking lot and scrolled through my phone, searching phrases like "TV turns on by itself" and "shower curtain closed when not used," like I was trying to diagnose my apartment. The internet offered me a list of comforting explanations. Software updates, HDMI CEC settings, humidity, air movement, cats. I didn't have a cat. That weekend, I bought a cheap indoor camera from a big box store. Not the kind that connected to a security system, just a little standalone thing that promised motion alerts and cloud storage. It felt like admitting I was scared. It felt like being paranoid. But I set it up anyway, pointing it at my living room and front door. Then I left the apartment and went to get groceries, telling myself I was being ridiculous. Halfway down the produce aisle, my phone buzzed. Motion detected. My heart lurched. I pulled the cart to the side and opened the app with trembling fingers. The camera feed loaded slowly, buffering on the grocery store Wi-Fi like it was trying to torture me. Then, the image appeared. My living room, empty. The couch, the coffee table, the TV off. Sunlight from the patio door making a bright rectangle on the carpet. No person, no movement. The motion alert timestamp was 2 minutes ago. I stared at the feed until my eyes hurt, waiting for something to change. Nothing did. I exhaled, a breath I didn't know I'd been holding, and felt my cheeks flush with shame. It must have been the AC kicking on, I told myself. Shadows shifting, light flickering. I bought my groceries and drove home, feeling foolish and oddly irritated, like my own mind was wasting my time. When I got back, everything looked normal, but the cabinet over the sink was open, not wide, just cracked open, like someone had pulled it and let it drift. I stood there holding my grocery bags and stared at that cabinet like it had spoken. My camera hadn't caught anyone, but the cabinet was open. I closed it slowly, feeling the hinge click. Then I opened the camera app again and scrubbed through the footage. The clip showed my living room in stillness. Then, Around the time the motion alert had triggered, the cabinet door moved. Not dramatically. Just a slight shift, as if someone had touched it and let it go. Except no one was in frame. The cabinet wasn't in frame. The camera faced the living room. It couldn't see the kitchen sink area, but the motion alert happened at the exact moment the cabinet shifted in my real apartment. My skin prickled. I rewound the clip and watched again, focusing on the parts of the room that were visible. The couch didn't move. The TV stayed dark. The sunbeam didn't shift enough to explain it. There was no obvious cause. I told myself it was coincidence, but my stomach didn't believe it. That night, I couldn't relax. I sat on the couch with the lights on and the TV volume turned up, pretending the noise made me safer. I ate dinner standing in the kitchen because sitting felt too vulnerable. I checked the locks so many times the deadbolt started to feel loose. At midnight, I finally forced myself to go to bed. I lay there in the dark, listening, and then I heard it. A sound so small I almost missed it. The soft click of the patio door handle. Not the door opening, just the handle. Click. My entire body tensed. I stared into the darkness, holding my breath. Another click, then a pause. Then, faintly, the sliding of glass against track. Just a fraction. The door didn't open fully. It couldn't, because I'd locked it. But something was testing it. Something was checking. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. Sitting up so fast, my head spun. The apartment was silent. The only sound was the air conditioning. I got out of bed, moving toward the living room with the flashlight beam shaking across the walls. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. When I reached the patio door, the lock was still engaged, but the door was not fully closed. It was slit open, maybe half an inch, enough to let a knife blade in, enough to let fingers in, enough to let the smell of warm desert night drift into my living room. My throat went tight. I pushed the door closed until it thudded into place. I relocked it, pressing down hard like force could make it more secure. Then I stood there, staring at the glass, at the darkness beyond, at my own reflection layered over the night. Outside, the patio was empty. The little concrete slab looked pale under the moonlight. The mesquite tree's branches cast thin shadows like spider legs. No one stood there, but someone had been. The next morning, I called the leasing office. I tried to sound calm. I tried to sound like a reasonable man, asking a reasonable question. "Hey," I said, "do maintenance workers ever enter units without notice?" The woman on the phone laughed lightly. "No, sir. They always give notice, unless it's an emergency." "Okay," I said. "Do they have keys?" "Yes," she said, as if the answer was obvious. I swallowed. "Is there any chance someone else, like a previous tenant, could still have access?" There was a pause, and I could picture her frowning. "No," she said carefully. "The locks are changed between tenants." I wanted to ask if she was sure. I wanted to ask if she'd personally watched someone change them. I wanted to ask how many times people had reported something like this and been brushed off, but I didn't. Instead, I said, "I think my patio door might not be sealing right. Can someone come check it?" "Sure," she said brightly. "We can put in a work order. Someone can come by this afternoon." "Will they call first?" I asked quickly. "Yes," she said, still cheerful. After I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table and stared at the cabinets. All closed, all innocent looking. I stared until my eyes started seeing shapes in the wood grain. I felt stupid. I felt scared. I felt angry at myself for being scared, which was its own special kind of misery. Maintenance came that afternoon while I was at work. They left a note on my counter that said they had adjusted the patio door latch and recommended I keep the track clean. That night, I cleaned the track. I scrubbed it like it was a wound. For a day or two, the apartment seemed calmer. No open cabinets, no TV turning on, no shower curtain drawn. I started to breathe again. I started to feel embarrassed about my panic. I even laughed at myself one night while brushing my teeth, thinking, "You're 34 years old and you got scared by a cabinet." Then, on Wednesday, I came home and my living room smelled like someone else's food. Not stale, not old, fresh, warm, lingering. The smell hit me as soon as I opened the front door. It was faint but unmistakable, like someone had microwaved something heavy and savory. Oil, spices, a hint of onions. I stood in the entryway, frozen. I didn't cook. Not like that. Not those smells. My meals were sad bachelor meals. Grilled chicken, rice, frozen burritos. This smelled like a person who lived like they weren't alone. I stepped inside slowly, scanning the room. The couch looked the same. The TV was off. The coffee table held my remote, my mail, my water bottle. But the air carried the evidence of a life that wasn't mine. My hands went cold. I went to the kitchen. The cabinet over the sink was open. This time, wide. I swallowed hard and stepped closer. Inside, one of my plates was missing. Not broken, not hidden, gone. I pulled the other plates out, stacked them on the counter, checking behind them like the missing plate might be wedged somewhere. It wasn't. My breathing came fast. I checked the dishwasher. Empty. I checked the sink. Empty. Then I noticed something else. The sponge. It was wet, not damp from old water. Wet, like it had been used recently. A bead of water slid down from it onto the counter as I stared. My skin prickled. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept every light on in the apartment. I sat on the couch with my phone in my hand, scrolling mindlessly, listening for any sound that wasn't the building. At 1:46 a.m., my camera sent a motion alert. My heart slammed into my throat. I opened the app. The feed loaded. And this time, it was not empty. A figure moved across my living room. Not a blur, not a shadow, a person. They were thin, moving quickly, head down, wearing dark clothes. Their face was turned away from the camera, but I could see the shape of their body clearly in the glow of my nightlight. They moved with familiarity. They didn't creep. They didn't hesitate. They crossed the room like they knew exactly where everything was. Then they sat on my couch, sat down like they belonged there. My stomach dropped so hard I thought I might vomit. The figure reached toward the coffee table, picked up my remote, and turned on my TV. The screen flashed blue in the camera feed. The person leaned back against the couch cushions, relaxed, like this was a normal night for them. I stared at my phone, frozen in disbelief, sitting 10 feet away from the living room in my bedroom, while a stranger sat on my couch. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. The figure on the couch turned their head slightly, as if listening. I realized then that the sound I'd made, a small involuntary gasp, had maybe carried. I clamped my hand over my mouth. The person stood abruptly. They looked toward the hallway, toward my bedroom. My blood went ice cold. They didn't come down the hall. Instead, they moved fast toward the kitchen, out of camera frame. The TV stayed on, the light flickering. Then the figure returned, holding something. A plate. My missing plate. They carried it like it mattered, like it was part of a routine. Then they walked to the patio door and slid it open, and disappeared into the night. The entire clip lasted less than a minute. I sat in my bedroom shaking, the phone screen bright in my hands, the video still playing on loop because my brain couldn't accept it and kept making me watch it again. Again, the figure crossed my living room. Again, they sat. Again, they turned on my TV. Again, they left with my plate. I wanted to call 911 immediately. My thumb hovered over the button, but fear does strange things to logic. Part of me thought, if I call, they'll still be here. They'll hear the sirens. They'll come back in before the police arrive. Part of me thought, if I call, I'll have to explain this. I'll have to admit I didn't lock something properly. I'll have to watch officers look at my beige apartment like it's a boring scene from a boring crime. And part of me thought, irrationally, what if they're still outside, watching, waiting? I stayed frozen until I heard nothing but the air conditioning. Then I moved, quietly, to the living room. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't want to give away my position. The TV was on, glowing, exactly like in the video. The sitcom was playing again, laugh track filling my apartment with fake happiness. My couch cushion was indented, still warm. I could feel it in the air, like the heat of another body had soaked into the fabric and was still there, lingering, refusing to leave. I backed away slowly, my entire body screaming at me to get out. I grabbed my keys, my wallet, my phone. I didn't pack clothes. I didn't gather anything important. I just left, barefoot, stepping into the night like a man evacuating a burning house. I drove to a 24-hour diner on the other side of town and sat in a booth until sunrise, drinking coffee I couldn't taste, watching the door every time it opened. In the daylight, I called the police. When the officer came, he was kind, but his eyes had that skeptical tiredness I recognized from dealing with people who were probably exaggerating. I showed him the video. He watched it twice, his expression tightening. "Do you recognize this person?" he asked. "No," I said, voice hoarse. He nodded slowly. "How long do you think they've been coming in?" The question hit me like a punch. How long? The open cabinets, the shower curtain, the TV turning on, the smell of food, the wet sponge. It had never been random. It had been someone living around me like I was a piece of furniture. "I don't know," I admitted. "Weeks, maybe longer." The officer checked the locks. He tested the patio door. It slid open easily, even when it was locked, because the latch wasn't fully catching. You had to push it harder than you'd think, until it clicked deep. "It's possible," he said carefully. "Someone figured out how to manipulate this." My stomach turned. Someone figured out my door. The officer asked if I had enemies, if my ex-wife had sent someone, if I'd made anyone angry. I shook my head. I felt embarrassed again, not because I'd been wrong, but because the truth was worse. I wasn't important enough for enemies. This wasn't personal. This was opportunistic. It was someone who saw my ground floor unit, saw the side patio hidden by a mesquite tree, saw the predictable hours of a man who went to work and came home and sat alone. It was someone who realized no one would notice an extra presence in the background of my life. The officer had me call the leasing office. They changed the locks that day. They adjusted the patio latch properly. They promised to check other units. The officer said they'd patrol the area. He gave me a report number and told me to call if anything happened again. I thanked him. I nodded like a normal person. But I didn't sleep in that apartment that night, or the next. I stayed with a coworker for a few days, then with my sister for a week. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the figure sitting on my couch like it was theirs. Every time I heard a laugh track, my heart jumped. Eventually, I had to go back. Because life doesn't stop for fear. Rent still comes due. Work still expects you in the office. Your toothbrush still sits in a cup. The first night back, I sat on my couch with all the lights on and stared at the patio door until my eyes burned. Everything was secure now. New locks, new latch, the patio track clean, the camera position better, covering the kitchen angle too. The apartment looked the same, but it didn't feel like mine anymore. The couch wasn't just a couch. It was a place someone else had rested. The kitchen wasn't just a kitchen. It was a place someone else had eaten. The living room wasn't a room. It was a stage where I'd been unknowingly sharing the space with a stranger, a quiet parasite in the walls of my routine. I realized then that there are different kinds of home invasion. There's the kind you see in movies, loud and violent and obvious. And then there's the kind that slips in quietly, uses your sponge, eats off your plate, sits on your couch, and leaves without breaking anything, because it doesn't need to. It only needs your absence. That was the worst part. The part that burrowed into my mind and refused to leave. Not that someone had entered my apartment, but that they had entered it like it was normal. Like I was the temporary one. Like my life was so empty it had space for someone else to live inside it without me even noticing. A week later, I was folding laundry when I found the plate. My missing plate. It was in the back of my closet, tucked behind a box of old paperwork. It hadn't been there before. I was sure. I hadn't used the closet in days. My hands went numb as I held it. It was clean, dry, not dusty, placed, like a message. Like someone saying, I can still put things where I want. I stood there in the cramped closet, my heart pounding, staring at that plate, and the realization hit me so hard it made me dizzy. Changing the locks didn't change what had happened. It didn't erase the fact that someone had been inside my life, quietly, confidently, as if the boundaries I believed in were optional. I set the plate down on the floor and backed out of the closet, shutting the door gently as if the space inside might react. That night, I sat on my couch and watched the camera feed on my phone, even though I was home, even though there was no motion, even though everything was quiet. I watched my own living room like I was watching someone else's. I listened to the building creak. I listened to the desert night outside, the distant traffic, the occasional bark of a dog. And when the TV screen flickered slightly, not turning on, just shifting as electronics do sometimes. My entire body tensed, because my apartment had taught me something I couldn't unlearn. That safety is not always broken by force. Sometimes it's broken by familiarity. Sometimes it's broken by the fact that someone, somewhere, can look at your quiet life and see not privacy, but opportunity. And even when they're gone, even when the doors are locked and the cabinets are closed and the shower curtain hangs open, you still feel it. The sense that your home has memory, that your rooms remember being used, that your living room, at some point in the dark, belonged to someone else. And that if you hadn't bought a camera, if you hadn't caught the moment on video, you might have lived your whole life thinking you were just forgetful, thinking you were just tired, thinking you were alone. But you weren't. Not really. Not in the way that matters. Story 4. The rooms I stopped using. When my husband died, people started offering me solutions like grief was a household problem you could fix with the right tool. Sell the place, my sister said on the phone, as if the house itself had done it. It's too big for you. Come stay with me for a while, my friend Donna insisted, already making plans in her voice. You shouldn't be alone out there. They said out there the way people talk about the country, like it's a separate planet where the rules are weaker, and the dark has more permission. And it was true, in a way. The farmhouse sat 10 miles outside Lubbock, down a stretch of road so straight it felt like it was drawn with a ruler. Mesquite trees crouched low to the ground. Barbed wire fences cut the land into rectangles. The wind never stopped. At night, the stars looked close enough to touch, and the silence had a thickness to it. But it was my home. It had been my home for 30 years. I knew every creak in the floorboards, every soft rattle in the windows when a storm came through, every place the paint peeled near the baseboards, because the house had settled and resettled like an old animal trying to get comfortable. After Jim, it was the only thing I had left that still felt like mine, so I stayed. I told myself staying was strength. I told myself I was fine. I told myself I wasn't the kind of woman who needed to be rescued. The first winter without him, I started closing doors, not because of the cold, because of the quiet. The house had always been big, but when there were two of you, it never felt empty. Jim's boots by the back door, the radio murmuring in the kitchen while he shaved, the way he talked to the dogs like they were people, the sound of him moving around the workshop, tools clinking, humming under his breath. Without him, the house expanded, hallways stretched, rooms felt farther away. At night, the silence pooled in corners and seemed to listen. I stopped using the guest room first, then the second bathroom, then Jim's old office, the one where he paid bills and kept a cigar box full of receipts he swore he'd organize someday. I shut those doors and told myself it was practical. Less to clean, less to heat, less to look at. Grief makes you efficient. I made the house smaller on purpose. In the part I still lived in, I kept things neat. I vacuumed twice a week. I wiped down counters. I folded blankets. I kept the living room lamp on in the evenings because I didn't like the way the dark pressed against the windows. I also started checking locks in a way I never had before. Jim was the lock checker. Jim was the one who walked the perimeter at night, flashlight in hand, looking at the barn doors and the gates and the window latches like it was his job to protect us from everything. After he died, the responsibility landed on me, heavy and unfamiliar. I bought new deadbolts. I replaced the back door latch. I installed motion lights on the corners of the house that flashed bright white whenever a rabbit moved through the yard. I set up a cheap camera by the porch, the kind that connected to my phone and sent notifications if it detected movement. It made me feel modern, which was funny, because the house itself still smelled like old wood and dust, and the faint ghost of cigarette smoke from Jim's years before he quit. For a while, it was enough. Then, the sounds started. I noticed them first in the evenings, when the sun dropped and the long Texas light drained from the sky like water down a sink. I'd sit in the living room with the television on, volume low, and I'd hear a creak from the hallway. Not a dramatic creak, not a bang, just a subtle shift, like someone stepping from one floorboard to the next. I'd freeze, remote in my hand, and listen. The house would offer nothing else. At first, I blamed settling. Old houses move. They contract and expand. They pop and sigh. I'd lived here long enough to know that. But I'd also lived here long enough to know the difference between the house moving and someone moving inside it. I told myself grief was making my senses sharper. I told myself I was jumpy because the world had changed and my body was still trying to adapt. Donna came by one afternoon with a casserole I didn't want and a look on her face like she'd rehearsed what she was about to say. "I'm worried about you, Mare," she said, standing in my kitchen, scanning the room like she was looking for signs of neglect. "I'm fine," I replied automatically, because that's what you say when you aren't. She set the casserole down and patted my arm. "You keep hearing things?" I stared at her. "I didn't say that." "You don't have to," she said gently. "You mentioned the noises last time." I had. Offhand. Like a joke. Like, "Oh, this old place creaks at night. Sometimes it sounds like someone's walking around." Donna didn't laugh. "Mare," she said, lowering her voice. "You should get someone to stay with you, at least for a little while." "I don't need that," I said, a little too sharply. She sighed. "Okay, then at least promise me you'll keep your doors locked. You're out here alone." I wanted to say, "I've always been out here." I wanted to say, "The house has always creaked." I wanted to say, "I'm not helpless." But the truth was, I had started sleeping lighter. I had started waking up at night with my heart racing for no reason, listening into the dark like an animal. So I nodded and changed the subject. When Donna left, I stood at the window and watched her car pull down the driveway, its tires crunching on gravel, until the sound faded into the open land. Then the house was quiet again. Too quiet. That night, I heard the footsteps more clearly. It was after midnight. I had fallen asleep in my chair, the television casting blue light across the living room. I woke up because the dogs were shifting on the rug, heads up, ears alert. The dogs didn't bark. They didn't growl. They listened. That was what made my stomach tighten. I muted the TV with shaking fingers and held my breath. From down the hallway, I heard it. A soft, slow step. Then another. Not heavy. Not hurried. Measured. It sounded like someone walking carefully, trying not to creak the boards too much, but not succeeding. The dog's nails clicked quietly on the floor as they stood. My mouth went dry. I reached for the lamp switch but stopped. Light felt like an invitation. Light made you visible. Instead, I took my phone from the side table and opened the camera app. The porch camera feed showed an empty porch, still and pale, under the motion light's dull glow. No movement outside. The sound came again, closer now, like whoever it was had moved from the hallway toward the closed doors of the rooms I didn't use, toward Jim's office. My heart hammered. I told myself, it's the house. It's wood settling. It's the dogs reacting to nothing. But the dogs weren't reacting to nothing. They were staring down the hallway, bodies tense, tails low. I stood slowly, my knees aching, and picked up the fireplace poker from the stand by the hearth. It was heavy and cold in my hand. I felt ridiculous, standing in my own living room holding a poker like a weapon, like I was in a story told by someone else. The footsteps stopped. The house held its breath. I waited, listening so hard my ears seemed to ring. Then, from somewhere deeper in the house, a door creaked. Not just a floorboard, a door. The sound was slow, deliberate, the hinges complaining softly. I gripped the poker tighter and walked toward the hallway. Each step I took made its own creak, and the house seemed to respond, offering up echoes and old wood sighs. The hallway was darker than the living room, shadowed, the light from the TV fading as I moved away. I stopped at the first closed door, the guest room. I placed my hand on the knob. It was cold. I turned it slowly. The door opened into darkness. Nothing was there, just the faint outline of a bed and a dresser, and the stale smell of a room that hadn't been used. I moved to the next door, the second bathroom. Empty. Then Jim's office. The door was not fully closed. It was cracked open, just a fraction, like someone had pulled it and let it drift. My stomach dropped so hard I felt nauseous. I knew I closed that door every day. It was a habit, a way of keeping his absence contained. I stared at the crack, my hand hovering inches from the knob, and my mind showed me an image I didn't want, of someone standing behind that door, watching me through the gap, silent. The dogs pressed close behind me, their bodies warm against my calves. I pushed the door open. The room was empty. Jim's desk sat in the corner, papers stacked neatly because I tidied them weeks ago, unable to bear the mess. The chair was tucked in, the lamp was off, the curtains were drawn, but the air in the room felt wrong. Not colder, not warmer. Used. Like the difference between a room that's been empty all day and a room that's just been occupied. A subtle thickness in the air, a faint smell that didn't match dust. I stepped inside, poker raised, scanning corners like I'd seen people do in movies. Nothing. I checked the closet. Nothing. I backed out slowly and closed the door, forcing it shut until the latch caught with a soft click. Then I stood there, heart pounding, and listened to the house settle into silence again. I didn't sleep after that. I sat in my chair until dawn. The poker across my lap, the dogs asleep at my feet, the TV flickering through infomercials I didn't watch. In the morning, sunlight made everything look foolish. I walked through the house and checked locks. Everything was secure. Still, as I made coffee, I noticed something that made my hands go still. The kitchen drawer where I kept my utensils was slightly open, just a half-inch. I stared at it. I closed it. Then I opened it again and looked inside. Nothing missing, nothing obviously disturbed. I told myself I must have left it open when I made dinner. Except, I hadn't cooked dinner. I'd eaten toast. That was the moment I started paying attention differently. I stopped dismissing the small things. I stopped laughing them off. I began cataloging. If the pantry door was open when I came in, I noted it. If the dogs stared at the hallway at night, I noted it. If the motion light blinked on and off for no reason, I noted it. A week later, I noticed the first missing item. It was stupid, almost insulting in its normality. A can of soup. I kept cans in the pantry the way you do when you've lived through enough hard times to prefer being prepared. Jim used to tease me about it, calling it my apocalypse shelf. One afternoon, I opened the pantry to grab a can of tomato soup and saw an empty space. At first, I assumed I'd used it and forgotten. But then, I looked at the row. Every can was aligned with labels facing outward. That was my habit. The shelf was neat, almost military. The empty space sat like a missing tooth. I counted. One can was gone. I stood there with my hand on the pantry door and felt something crawl up my spine. No one else had access. No one came out here. The last person to visit was Donna, and she hadn't gone into my pantry. I told myself maybe the can had rolled back. Maybe I'd misplaced it. I moved everything, pulling cans forward, reaching behind them. It wasn't there. That night, I ate a different soup and tried not to think about it. 2 days later, I noticed something else. The guest bathroom towel was damp. I didn't use that bathroom. I hadn't stepped foot in it in weeks. The towel hung neatly on its rack, pale blue, folded in thirds. I touched it. It was not just damp from humidity. It was damp like it had been used, wrung out, and rehung. My stomach tightened. I walked into my bedroom and looked at myself in the mirror. My face looked older than it had last year. Grief did that. It hollowed you out and left a sharper version behind. You're imagining it, I whispered to my reflection, but my voice sounded unconvincing. That night, I didn't turn the TV on. I sat in silence with the house, letting it speak. Around 12:30, the dogs lifted their heads. Their ears pivoted. They stared down the hallway again. I held my breath, and then I heard it. A soft sound, almost too small to be real. A shuffle, not in the hallway, behind a closed door. One of the rooms I didn't use. I rose slowly, poker in hand again, and moved toward the hallway. The dogs didn't follow this time. They stayed behind me, hovering at the edge of the living room like they didn't want to cross that boundary. The hallway was darker than usual. The bulb overhead flickered faintly. Old wiring. I stopped at Jim's office door. My hand hovered over the knob, and then I heard a sound from the other side. A quiet exhale. Human. My heart lurched. For a moment, I couldn't move. My body locked, every muscle tightening as if preparing for impact. I pressed my ear close to the wood. Silence. Then, faintly, the soft scrape of something moving across the surface. like fabric against carpet. My mouth went dry. I tightened my grip on the poker until my fingers ached. I turned the knob and shoved the door open. The room was empty, but the chair at Jim's desk was pulled out, not far, just an inch or two, like someone had sat there and stood up quickly. And on the desk, beside the lamp, sat an object that hadn't been there before. A coffee mug. Not mine, not Jim's. A plain white mug with a small chip on the rim. It looked ordinary, the kind of mug you might find at a thrift store. But seeing it on Jim's desk made my skin crawl, like I'd found a stranger's handprint on my throat. I didn't touch it. I stood in the doorway, poker raised uselessly, staring at that mug like it was a living thing. The dogs whined softly behind me. My phone was in my pocket. I could have called 911. I didn't, because I couldn't explain it, because it sounded insane, because a mug is not a crime, because part of me still wanted it to be grief. I backed out and shut the door, my hand shaking so badly the knob rattled. Then I went to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water I didn't drink. I stood there in the dim light, listening for movement, for breathing, for anything. The house offered me nothing. In the morning, the mug was gone. I went straight to Jim's office as soon as the sun came up, my heart pounding like I was walking into a courtroom. The desk was clear, no mug, the chair was pushed in. The room looked untouched, as if the night before had been a hallucination. My mind scrambled for explanations. Donna playing a prank, a maintenance worker, a neighbor kid. But none of those fit. None of those would leave a mug on my dead husband's desk and then take it away again. That week, I found more small things. A loaf of bread with one slice missing. A half-used bar of soap in the guest bathroom that hadn't been there before. A blanket in the guest room folded differently, the crease wrong, as if someone had slept under it and tried to make it look untouched. That was when I stopped pretending. Someone was in my house, not breaking windows, not kicking doors in, living around me, using the parts of the house I had abandoned, the rooms I stopped using. I told myself the motion lights would catch them. The camera would alert me. But the camera only watched the porch. The motion lights were outside. Whoever it was, they understood the house better than that. They knew how to move through shadows. They knew where the light didn't reach. They knew when I was asleep. I bought another camera. Then another. I placed one in the hallway aimed at the closed doors. I placed one in the kitchen, angled toward the back hallway. I didn't tell anyone, because I didn't want to hear the pity in Donna's voice, or the alarm in my sister's. I told myself I was being smart. That night, I forced myself to go to bed like normal. I locked my bedroom door, which I'd never done before Jim died, because it made me feel like a guest in my own home. I lay in the dark, listening to the faint hum of the AC, the occasional scratch of a dog shifting on the floor. At 1:12 a.m., my phone buzzed, motion detected. My stomach dropped. I opened the camera feed with trembling fingers. The hallway camera showed the dim corridor, doors closed, shadows still. Then, slowly, a door moved. The guest room door. It opened just a fraction, the way it had the night I found Jim's office cracked. The way a door opens when someone is careful. My breath stopped. A sliver of darkness appeared in the gap. Then, a shape, a face, partially visible. Not fully stepping out, just peeking, like someone checking if the coast was clear. The face was too far from the camera for details, but I saw enough. Pale skin, an eye catching a faint reflection. A stillness that felt practiced. I clamped my hand over my mouth to keep from making a sound. The face withdrew. The door closed silently. Almost. The latch didn't catch fully, and the door sat slightly ajar. My entire body shook. I stared at the feed until my eyes burned, waiting for them to reappear. They didn't. I waited 5 minutes, then 10, the phone sweating in my grip, my heart beat loud in my ears. Then my kitchen camera buzzed. Motion detected. I switched feeds. The kitchen was empty, but the pantry door was open, wide, like someone had just been inside it. I had closed it before bed. I was sure of it. I slid out of bed, every muscle tight with fear. I picked up my phone, the screen bright, and crept to the bedroom door. I didn't have the poker anymore. It was by the fireplace. The idea of going back for it felt absurd, like bringing a stick to a gunfight. The dogs were asleep in the living room. I could see their shapes through the crack under the door. I pressed my ear to the bedroom door. Nothing. No footsteps. No breathing. I eased the door open. The hallway was dark. The guest room door sat slightly open. My skin prickled. I took one step into the hallway, then another. My house felt different now. Not just empty, occupied, like the air held awareness. I moved toward the guest room door, my phone flashlight off because I didn't want to announce myself. The door creaked softly as I pushed it open. The guest room was dark, moonlight faint through the curtains. I swept my phone's flashlight beam across the bed. The comforter was pulled down slightly, rumpled at the foot, like someone had stood there. The pillow on the left side was indented, fresh, the impression of a head. The sheet beneath it was creased in a way that didn't match how I made beds. I swallowed hard. My beam moved to the floor. There, near the closet, was a pair of shoes. Not mine. Men's shoes, dusty, brown, worn at the heels. They were positioned neatly, side by side, as if someone had taken them off before getting into bed. My stomach turned. This wasn't someone sneaking through. This wasn't a quick theft. This was someone living here, coexisting. My mind flashed to all the nights I had slept down the hall, telling myself the house was empty, telling myself the footsteps were grief, telling myself I was safe because I had locked the doors. All that time, someone had been behind these doors, just out of my daily map of the house. My throat tightened. I backed out of the guest room without turning around, not wanting to see movement in the shadows, not wanting to give the dark the chance to prove me right. In the hallway, I stepped toward Jim's office. The door was closed. I stood there, phone in hand, shaking, and then I heard it, a soft, slow inhale, on the other side of Jim's office door, like someone had been standing there listening to me. I froze. My heart hammered so hard I thought it would give me away. The inhale came again, deeper, followed by a faint exhale, almost a sigh. I stared at that door, at the wood grain I knew so well, and I realized with a sick clarity that whoever was inside had heard me enter the guest room. They had heard the flashlight. They had heard my breath, and they weren't running. They weren't panicking. They were waiting. My phone buzzed again, another motion alert, and the vibration felt like a scream in my hand. The dog started to growl, low and uncertain. From inside Jim's office, a soft sound came, like fingers brushing against the door from the inside. Not a knock, a touch, testing. My knees threatened to give out. I took one step backward, then another, my mind screaming at me to turn and run, to get to the front door, to get outside, to get in the car, and never come back. But my feet wouldn't move fast. Fear made them heavy. The office doorknob turned. Slowly, the latch clicked. The door opened, just a fraction, the way the guest room door had. And in that thin sliver of darkness, I saw an eye, watching me, steady, unblinking. My chest tightened so hard I couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream, but my voice was gone. The eye stayed there, calm, patient, as if it had all the time in the world, as if this was not the first time we had been in the same house together, as if the only difference tonight was that I had finally walked into the rooms I stopped using. And then the eye blinked once, slowly, like a person acknowledging they'd been seen, and the door began to open wider. Story 5. They knew our schedule. The first sign was a toy, a stupid, brightly colored plastic dinosaur that should have been in our living room, under the coffee table where it always ended up, wedged between dust bunnies and missing Lego pieces. Instead, I found it on the stairs, not tossed there in the careless way our kids did everything, not half-hidden, not kicked up against the wall. It was placed neatly on the third step, centered like someone had positioned it deliberately. I stopped with my car key still in my hand and stared at it. "Nicole?" I called, raising my voice just enough to carry. "In the kitchen." My wife answered. I picked up the dinosaur and held it up like evidence as I walked in. "Did you put this on the stairs?" Nicole glanced over her shoulder while she loaded dishes into the dishwasher. "No. Why would I? It was sitting there like a decoration." She frowned, then shrugged. "One of the kids. Probably." That was the most reasonable explanation. Liam was 6 and moved through the house like a storm. Emma was 4 and loved setting up toys for her dolls to play with. They could make a room look like it had been ransacked in under 3 minutes. So I shrugged too. I set the dinosaur back in the living room bin and went upstairs to change, telling myself that was the end of it. But the thing about schedules is that they make you blind. They train you to overlook small inconsistencies because you're always moving toward the next thing. Pick up the kids, make dinner, answer emails, laundry, bath time, lights out, repeat. When you're living that way, your brain stops paying attention to the house as a place and starts treating it like a machine you operate. So the signs, when they came, slid into the cracks of our routine, like an unlocked door. It happened a few nights later. I went to take the trash out after dinner and found the back door unlocked. Not just unlocked, but not fully latched. It was closed, but there was a tiny gap, the thin line of darkness you only see when a door isn't sealed. I remember standing there with my hand on the knob, feeling my stomach tighten. We always locked that door. Always. It was a thing Nicole and I had agreed on the moment we moved into the cul-de-sac, the moment we realized that Naperville's safety was partly real and partly a story people told themselves to sleep better. We had a checklist in our heads. Doors locked. Garage closed. Alarm set. I turned the lock and pushed the door shut until it clicked fully into place. Nicole looked up from wiping the counter. Everything okay? Back door was unlocked, I said, trying to sound casual. She wiped her hands on a dish towel. No, it wasn't. I locked it after I let the dog out. Well, it's unlocked now. Her mouth tightened slightly. Maybe Liam. He's been playing with the latch. Maybe, I said, though Liam wasn't strong enough to mess with that latch without leaving it half twisted. We checked on the kids. They were in the living room watching cartoons, faces glowing blue in the TV light, looking innocent in the way children always do, like the concept of consequences hasn't fully attached to them yet. Did you unlock the back door? I asked Liam, keeping my tone light. He didn't look away from the screen. No. Emma shook her head too, hair bouncing. Nope. Nicole and I exchanged a look. Sometimes kids lie. Sometimes they forget. Sometimes they do things without realizing it matters. We moved on. The next sign was the lights. One morning, I woke up early for work, before the kids, before Nicole, before the house started its daily hum. I padded downstairs in the dim quiet and noticed the hallway light was off. It should have been on. Nicole always left it on at night for Emma, who had recently decided she was afraid of the dark again. We had a deal. The light stayed on, and Emma stayed in bed. I stood there, blinking in the shadowed hallway, and turned it on. Later that day, Nicole asked me, "Why was the hallway light off this morning?" I stared at her. "I thought you turned it off." She shook her head slowly. "No, we didn't say the obvious thing. Not yet. We didn't say someone. We said Liam must have done it. Or Emma. Or maybe the bulb flickered and went out and came back. Or maybe we were both misremembering." Saying we were misremembering was easier than saying we were being watched. Naperville is the kind of place where people take pride in routine. The cul-de-sac felt like a small bubble of predictability. The same neighbors walking dogs at the same times. The same couples waving from driveways as they loaded kids into SUVs. The lawns were manicured. The street was quiet. The houses all had two-car garages and big front windows that made everything feel open, friendly, visible. Visible is a kind of safety until you realize it works both ways. It was the third week when Nicole found the first real proof. She called me from upstairs while I was making coffee. "Ryan?" Her voice was tight. "In the kitchen. Come here." I set the mug down and walked up, 2 steps at a time, annoyance already rising in my chest because mornings were always a rush, and anything that slowed us down felt like an attack. Nicole stood in our bedroom closet, holding her jewelry box. It was open. The lid was tilted back. The small drawers were slightly pulled out. Nicole's face was pale. "Did you go in here?" she asked. "No," I said immediately. "Why?" She held up her engagement ring. Not the ring she wore every day, the simple band. The original engagement ring. The one she only wore on anniversaries. The one she kept in the velvet-lined box, wrapped in tissue. It was sitting on top of the box, not inside, just placed there, like someone had taken it out and set it down. My stomach dropped. "Maybe you did," I said, though the words sounded weak even to me. Nicole's eyes flashed. "Ryan, I haven't opened this box in months." I stared at the ring. The diamond caught the morning light and flashed innocently. "Okay," I said slowly. "Okay, maybe the kids got into it." Nicole's voice rose. "How?" The closet door was closed. The box was on the top shelf. Emma can't even reach it. Liam could climb. Liam could reach. But Liam also would have taken the ring, not placed it neatly on top like he was borrowing it, and he would have left a mess. He always left a mess. I felt a cold, crawling sensation in my chest. That day, we installed cameras. Not because we were paranoid, because Nicole's voice on the phone to me at lunch had sounded like she was trying not to cry. "Something's wrong," she said. "I feel like someone's been in here." I found myself picturing our house as an object, something someone could open and close, enter and leave, without us noticing. I pictured our kids sleeping upstairs while Nicole and I watched TV downstairs, assuming the doors and locks and Suburban distance were enough. I went home early and bought a set of indoor cameras, the kind that connected to our phones and sent motion alerts. I set one in the living room, aimed at the front door and stairs. I set one in the kitchen, aimed at the back door. I set one in the hallway upstairs, near the bedrooms. Nicole watched me do it with her arms crossed, her mouth a thin line. "Do you think someone's breaking in?" she asked quietly. "I don't know," I admitted, "but I want to know." That night, after the kids were asleep, Nicole and I sat on the couch with our phones in our hands like we were waiting for a test result. The house felt different now, like the cameras had changed the air, like we had acknowledged the possibility of danger and in doing so, invited it to prove us right. We went to bed around 11. At 2:03 a.m., my phone buzzed. Motion detected. Kitchen camera. My eyes snapped open. Nicole stirred beside me. "What is it?" she whispered. I opened the app with shaking fingers. The feed loaded. The kitchen was dark, lit only by the faint glow of the microwave clock. The back door stood closed. The countertop sat still. No movement. Then, slowly, the pantry door moved. It opened a few inches. My stomach dropped so hard it felt like falling. The pantry door opened wider, inch by inch, as if someone was pulling it carefully from the inside to avoid making noise. Then, a shadow shifted in the doorway. A shape moved across the kitchen floor, low and quick. My breath stopped. The camera's night vision made everything ghostly. Gray tones and sharp contrasts. The figure was hard to see clearly, but it was there, moving with intention. It went to the counter, paused, then moved toward the drawer where we kept scissors and batteries and the junk of daily life. The drawer slid open, not yanked, not forced. Opened like someone who knew exactly which drawer to use. Nicole's hand gripped my arm so hard it hurt. "Oh my God," she whispered. The figure rummaged quietly, then closed the drawer. Then it moved toward the back door. It reached for the lock. My blood went cold. Because the lock turned smoothly, like it had been unlocked already, the figure slipped out. The back door shut behind it, silent. The whole thing took less than 30 seconds. Nicole let out a shaky breath. "Ryan, call the police." My thumb hovered over 911, but my brain was stuck on one detail. The lock turned smoothly. Unlocked already. The back door we had found unlatched before. It hadn't been a child. It hadn't been forgetfulness. It had been a test. I called 911. The dispatcher asked for my address, asked what was happening, asked if the intruder was still inside. I said no, but I didn't know. I didn't know where the person was now. I didn't know if they were still in the yard, still watching. The dispatcher told us to stay in our bedroom with the door locked. She told us officers were on the way. Nicole and I sat on the bed, holding hands in the dark, listening. Downstairs, the house was silent, but the silence felt occupied, like the air itself was waiting. Then my phone buzzed again. Motion detected. Living room camera. My heart lurched. I opened the feed. The living room was empty. The front door was closed. Then, from the left side of the frame, a figure stepped into view. This time, it was clearer. A man, tall, wearing dark clothes, a hood pulled up, his face obscured in the grainy night vision. He moved calmly, not hurried. He walked to our front window and stood there, looking out. Not looking out at the street, looking out at the driveway, as if checking for police, as if he expected them. Nicole covered her mouth with her hand, eyes wide. The man turned slightly, and for a second, He faced the camera. Even though the night vision blurred details, I felt it. The sensation of being seen. Then he lifted his hand and waved. Not frantic, not mocking. A slow, casual wave, like a neighbor, like someone who belonged. My entire body went cold. Nicole began to cry silently, shaking, her shoulders trembling. The man walked out of frame, heading toward the stairs. Upstairs, toward our bedrooms. My chest tightened so hard I couldn't breathe. The hallway camera buzzed. Motion detected. I switched feeds. The upstairs hallway was empty for a heartbeat. Then the figure appeared at the bottom of the stairs, climbing slowly, one step at a time. Not rushing, not sneaking, just coming. My mind screamed to get the kids, to run into Liam's room, to grab Emma, to barricade. But my body was frozen, locked in place by terror and the awful realization that we were trapped inside our own routine. The man reached the top step and paused, standing in the hallway, head tilted as if listening. Then he turned toward the kids' rooms. Nicole made a sound that wasn't even a word, just a raw, broken noise. I threw myself out of bed, grabbing the baseball bat I kept in the closet, the one I'd never used for anything but dust. My hands shook so badly the bat clattered against the doorframe. I yanked our bedroom door open and stepped into the hallway, bat raised, phone in my other hand, streaming the camera feed that now showed only empty darkness because I was occupying the same space in real life. The hallway was empty. No man, no shadow, nothing. The air smelled like carpet and warm house and the faint sweetness of Emma's shampoo. I stood there, bat raised, heart pounding, and listened so hard my ears rang. Nothing. Then, downstairs, a door clicked. The back door. I ran to the stairs, nearly tripping, Nicole behind me, whispering, "Ryan, the kids, the kids." But I was already moving. I flew down the stairs and into the kitchen. The back door was closed, locked. The pantry door was shut again. Everything looked normal, like nothing had happened. Except it had, because our phones were still buzzing with motion alerts, because the cameras had recorded it, because Nicole's tears were real, and because the house, for the first time since we'd moved in, felt like it could hide someone. The police arrived minutes later, but it felt like hours. 2 officers walked through the house with flashlights, checking closets, checking under beds, checking the basement. They checked the yard, the fence line, the garage. They found nothing. They told us, gently, that sometimes cameras can glitch, that shadows can trigger motion, that doors can shift with temperature. I showed them the clip of the pantry door opening, the drawer sliding, the lock turning. The officer's expression hardened slightly. "That's not a glitch," he said quietly. He asked if we had enemies, if someone knew our schedule, if we'd had contractors recently, if we'd lost a key. And then he asked the question that made my stomach drop all over again. "Do you have a spare key hidden outside?" Nicole and I exchanged a glance. I went to the kitchen drawer and pulled out a small magnet, the kind you stick under something metal. It held a spare key, the one we kept, just in case, the one we'd never used. I stared at it. The officer nodded slowly, like he'd seen this before. "They found it," he said, "and once they find it, it's not your spare anymore." He told us to change locks immediately. He told us to take the spare key inside. He told us to keep cameras running, to call if it happened again. Before he left, he looked at the cul-de-sac through our front window, at the quiet street, the neat lawns, the safety story everyone told themselves. "They pick places like this," he said, "because you don't expect it." After the police left, the house felt worse, because now we knew we weren't imagining it. Now we knew someone had entered our home, moved through it calmly, and left. And not just any someone. Someone who knew where our spare key was. Someone who knew our pantry, our drawers, our routine. Someone who knew how to move without leaving signs that neighbors would notice. Someone who could wave at our camera like a neighbor. The next day, I changed every lock myself. Front door, back door, garage door. I installed a deadbolt on the interior garage entrance too, because my brain couldn't stop finding new ways to be afraid. Nicole started checking the kids' windows each night, pressing down on the locks, tugging at the frames. Liam asked why we were acting weird. Emma asked why the hallway light stayed on all night now, bright enough to bleach the shadows away. We told them It was because of a storm coming, because of safety, because of anything that didn't sound like the truth. But the truth hung in the air anyway. Weeks passed. Nothing happened again. No pantry doors opening. No lights off. No toys placed carefully on stairs. Life tried to return to normal. The kids laughed again. Nicole stopped flinching at every creak. I almost started believing we'd fixed it. Then, one evening, I came home from work and found something taped to our front door. A small piece of paper, folded in half, stuck under the doorbell camera like someone wanted it to be recorded. My hands went cold as I pulled it free. Inside, written in neat, careful handwriting, were 4 words. "You lock up early." That was all. No signature, no threat. Just an observation, like a note left by someone who'd been watching long enough to know. Nicole read it over my shoulder and made a choking sound. I stared at the paper, my mind trying to find a way to explain it that didn't involve the worst. But there was no explanation that made it harmless, because it meant they were still close enough to leave a note. It meant they still knew our schedule. It meant they had stood on our porch in the same place the pizza driver stood in Las Vegas, in the same place the jogger's shadow stood in Maine, in the same place a stranger stood behind a cracked door in Texas, and they had felt confident enough to remind us that they knew. I crumpled the paper in my fist until it tore. Nicole whispered, "Ryan, what do we do?" I looked at our front window, at the cul-de-sac beyond, at the neighbors watering lawns and walking dogs, at the ordinary world continuing as if nothing had changed. And I understood then, in a way I never had before, that the horror of a home invasion isn't always the moment someone enters. Sometimes the horror is the aftermath. The way your house stops feeling like yours. The way routine stops being comforting and starts being a vulnerability. The way you start measuring your life in predictable patterns that someone else can learn. Because once someone has mapped you, once someone has studied the rhythm of your days, you realize something that sits like a stone in your chest. You can change locks, you can install cameras, you can keep lights on, but you cannot undo the fact that your home, the place you thought was a boundary, has been treated like an open book. And every night, as the house quiets and the kids breathe softly upstairs, you find yourself listening to the silence outside, wondering if it's empty, or if it's just waiting for the schedule to start again. You have reached the end of these accounts, the point where the doors are closed again, the locks are checked one last time, and the house settles back into the shape it pretends to keep. The stories you heard tonight do not end with arrests, or explanations, or the comfort of knowing exactly when the danger left. They rarely do. Some intrusions are interrupted, some are narrowly escaped, and some are never fully understood, because nothing was taken, nothing was broken, and no one could prove where the boundary failed. If any of these stories stayed with you, if a detail lingered longer than the rest, a knock that felt wrong, a room that no longer felt empty, a routine that suddenly seemed too predictable, do not dismiss that feeling. Home invasions do not always begin with violence. They begin with observation. A schedule learned quietly. A lock tested once, then remembered. A spare key noticed and left alone until needed. A door that is checked because someone knows when it will be. Most people imagine danger announces itself. It doesn't. It studies. It waits. It blends into what already feels normal. And when someone crosses the threshold, the most terrifying part is often not the moment they enter, but the realization that the house has already been understood. In the real world, many home invasions are never reported as such. They are filed as burglaries, as disturbances, as misunderstandings, or not filed at all. Because fear without proof is easy to minimize. Because survival convinces people to move forward. Because the house still stands, and the routine still functions. But a home is not just a structure. It is a system. And once that system has been accessed, even briefly, even without force, it does not reset simply because the door is closed again. If you ever believe someone has entered your home without permission, trust that instinct. Document what you notice, change access points immediately, and contact local authorities. You do not need certainty to protect yourself. You need awareness. Because the difference between a close call and a permanent consequence is often a moment when someone chose to act before the system failed completely. If these stories unsettled you, if they felt uncomfortably familiar, or if you found yourself mentally checking your own doors while listening, you are not overreacting. That feeling is not paranoia. It is recognition, and recognition is often the only warning a system gives you. If you want to continue exploring stories like these, stories rooted in real spaces, real routines, and real vulnerability, consider subscribing to Entity Shadows. Here, the horror does not come from monsters or myths, but from ordinary lives intersecting with people who should never have known them. If you choose to share this video, do so not because it frightened you, but because it reminded you how fragile the idea of safety can be. And if you carry a story of your own, a moment when your home no longer felt like it belonged only to you, a time when something small didn't add up, or when a routine broke in a way you still can't explain, you are welcome to share it. Instructions for submissions are available in the channel bio, and your experience may help someone else recognize what they are trying not to see. Thank you for listening, for staying attentive, for noticing the details most people overlook. And as you return to your own home tonight, pause before you assume the quiet means empty. Listen carefully, and remember, the most dangerous intrusions are not the ones that force their way in, but the ones that learn how to enter without being noticed. And remember, the dark awaits.